Welcome to episode 17 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I'm your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. We are here to recap the first half of the conference finals. Let's get right into it.
The series that we've been waiting for that was highly anticipated, the New York Knicks and Indiana Pacers, kicked off on May 21st with an absolute thriller. This was a game that took place in the Garden in Madison Square Garden, New York. The Knicks held a 20-plus point lead at one point. Pacers stormed back. We had the ridiculous Halliburton shot that bounced on the back of the rim up to Mars, fell down. You got the signature choke from Halliburton entering his inner Reggie Miller, thinking he had just won the game for the Pacers. It was overruled for a two, ends up going into overtime. Pacers then were able to get the win, but the pressing issue of game one was Aaron Nesmith hitting 5 threes in the final few minutes of this game. This is the first time in NBA history a team has been down 9 in the final minute and have come back to win it. That is in large part thanks to what Aaron Nesmith did and the shot that Tyrese Halliburton hit in this game. Game one was an absolute thriller. Then you kind of get into game two, and this was one that, unlike game one, was just absolutely dominated by the Indiana Pacers. They controlled the pace of play. The Knicks just looked out of rhythm the whole game. You had a good Brunson game. He had 36, but Siakam put up 39 for the Pacers, and it just never felt like they got much of anything from the bench, which was a complete different story from game three, as I'll get into. But Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride were the only ones that did anything for the Knicks. They went three deep. Cameron Payne was awful in the first two games of the series. He was then benched in game three, rightfully so. But this one was all about Pacers controlling pace of play. You didn't really have a signature Halliburton game, but this was why you traded for Pascal Siakam. Just he got to his spots. The turnaround over his right shoulder was just money all game. He was a plus 16 if you care about plus minus. The Pacers went pretty deep. We saw Tony Bradley sighting, which I don't know the last time that he had stepped on the court for the Pacers, but they were kind of doing something different, throwing into some weird lineup combinations throughout this game. Carlisle went kind of deep into the rotation, even played Thomas Bryant. And Benedict Mathurin has been awful this series. I think he has averaging 4 points in this series. I don't even know if he's going to be playing in game four, but Pacers dominated pace of play in games two, and then that transferred over, and they just shell shocked the Knicks coming out in Gainbridge Fieldhouse last night, and we saw them just put on a flurry early. Everybody was getting in on the scoring for the Indiana Pacers, and they mounted a 20-point lead, which they then kind of fumbled away towards the end of that second quarter. And I think that's where the Knicks kind of really made their mark on this game. Obviously, I'll get into the fourth quarter in a minute, but that stretch, the last 2 minutes of the second quarter to get that game down to 13, you got yourself a little bit of momentum. You saw some guys kind of make some shots to give them some confidence, and then they just kind of opened the floodgate. You had a 20-point fourth quarter from Karl Anthony Towns. A lot of haters, few that we know, one that's on this podcast, are going to owe Karl Anthony Towns a massive apology for the way he played in game three. I thought not just offensively, obviously the 20-point fourth quarter that propelled the Knicks to steal game three in Gainbridge Fieldhouse after another 20-point comeback in this series. But the ability, and not the maybe not the ability, but the ability to play Karl Anthony Towns on the floor alone because Brunson was in foul trouble, that made the world of difference. The ability that they were able to stagger the Brunson Towns minutes, not playing them on the floor, and even Carlisle said it after. They played their best defensive lineups in this game, which was the key turning point. The Indiana Pacers just looked stoned offensively. They couldn't get anything going. I thought Karl Anthony Towns, when he was playing drop coverage specifically on the Halliburton Miles Turner pick and roll, was able to get big, not allow Halliburton to just dump it off or play the point guard role that we've seen him do and distribute. They had a reset. Oftentimes the Pacers were taking bad shots late in the clock. But this was a win that was engineered on Tom Thibodeau just throwing everything out there. He threw Shaman in there at one point. DeLon Wright played 13 minutes. Deuce McBride hit several massive shots throughout the course of this game. He was huge in the fourth quarter. They didn't even play Brunson majority of the fourth quarter. So that was really, really interesting to me. The Knicks get a big win, and this series is 2-1 in favor of the Pacers. We got a big pivotal game four in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, Indianapolis on Tuesday.
Yeah, a lot of takeaways throughout the first couple games, and I'll start with a couple things on game one. um, I mean, just an absolute thriller of a game, and you know, this has been the series of 20-point leads, which in an overarching theme here that, in my opinion, I think people make too much about teams losing 20-point leads at this point. It seems just like it's a regular occurrence. I mean, the way scoring is now, the way momentum works in sports in general is I mean, they can these leads just disappear in no time. And yeah, Aaron Neesmith, not only did he make those 5 threes in the fourth quarter, but he was 8 of 9 from three for the entire game in that game one. And Nimhart also was 6 of 10 from the field that game. So you had Halliburton who played very good, dropping 31 and 11, but he's getting a lot of help from these other guys. And then you move to the Siakam game in game two. And then game three, yeah, you mentioned it. They were flurry. It felt like the series was over. They were up 20. You're thinking, okay, the Pacers are at home. Knicks haven't won in a playoff game in this building, and I don't know how long. And um, all of a sudden, a guy who played a terrible first half, in my opinion, Carl Anthony Towns, just I'll admit it. I think this was the biggest accomplishment in Carl Anthony Towns' career was this fourth quarter with their superstar on the bench in foul trouble, down 20 point or down whatever they were at the point where Carl Anthony Towns starts to just take over. He hits a three. He drives in, gets an and one. He makes a crazy pass under the basket. Drives in on Miles Turner, has him in the corner, spots him up, pump fake, drives in, finishes with the left hand. I mean, he was taking the game over, um, possession after possession, fighting as they were fighting their way back into it. And the Pacers were relying a lot on TJ McConnell there in that third quarter and then the early fourth quarter, and it eventually just ran out. But yeah, you mentioned they were getting very late in the shot clock. But I mean, yeah, it was weird for Tom Thibodeau to play some of these guys, but it seemed to work out. Josh Hart hasn't played as good of a series as I thought he would. But overall, I mean, obviously, I didn't think the series would have ended out in the way that these games have shaped out. But with me picking the Pacers in seven to before the series started, I still feel pretty good about my pick as far as that goes. Although, these things can change in no time as we've seen it here. But I mean, it took a massive flurry from Carl Anthony Towns and efforts from other guys, like you mentioned, McBride. They did move Mitchell Robinson to that starting lineup, which was their first change of the entire season for that starting lineup, moving Josh Hart to the bench. But overall, this has been a very interesting series. And the Pacers, I mean, if they can get up 3-1 tomorrow night at home, then they have to feel really good about where they're at going forward. But I mean, like I said, these things change every single night, and Brunson's been doing what Brunson's done. The only issue he had yesterday was just simply getting in foul trouble. But he came back in and he hit. As soon as he got back in the game, he drives in and hits a floater towards the end of the game, and then they had to pull him out because he picks up his fifth foul, and that's when really Karl Anthony Towns started going berserk. But like I said, yeah, I'm no Karl Anthony Towns fan by any means, and I was ready to jump on his on the loser bandwagon for him as he was taking some pretty bad shots in that first half, in my opinion. And all of a sudden, I think he single handedly saved the Knicks season as they were down by 20 points on the road, down 2-0, on the verge of the series would have been over. There's no one ever has came back from 3-0, and when they needed it most, he showed up for them. But he's going to have to do it three more times if they are going to want to win this series.
Yeah, and we saw it early in that fourth quarter. Brunson picked up that fifth foul and they pulled him. McBride was in there. And that's when really the run started for the Knicks because they were starting to get stops. Like you mentioned, we didn't really get to see what that Mitchell Robinson insert into the starting lineup could really do because it was really early in this game. Towns and Jalen Brunson were both in foul trouble. And so that lineup did not spend much time out there as Towns picked up a couple cheap fouls early and was out of out of the game pretty quickly. And so I'll be interested to see if Tibbs sticks with that. Um, you mentioned Josh Hart not having a great game, but I thought he may have made the play of the game. There was a shot that went up by Miles Turner, a pretty poor three-point attempt, honestly, that the Pacers had a chance to either take the lead or tie the game, and they decide to jack up a three to take the lead. It's a pretty contested three by Miles Turner. Hart runs in from the far left wing and gets a rebound over everybody in the process of getting just hammered, fouled. One of the key moments in this game, because if the Pacers had done it all series really, and they're getting massive offensive rebound, the offensive rebound discrepancy in this series, there's been so many offensive rebounds, just teams not hustling on the boards, but Hart realized the significance of that moment, ran in, got the board, got fouled, put two free throws on it. The Knicks were then up four after that moment. And then really that whole allow McBride to play late in the game. They were able to leave Brunson off the court until a minute and a half to go. That's when Tibbs inserted him back into the lineup. Um, Brunson then made what would end up being the game ceiling floater towards the end of the game. But just shout out Tibbs for what I mean, people were calling for his head. People were asking if ESPN was hosting this game just so they could pull Michael Malone off the mic and stick him in as the coach for the rest of the series. He did a wonderful job mixing and matching, especially in a game where you had to win it. You were down big. Your two stars were in foul trouble. You had to just kind of throw guys together in random lineup rotations, and it ended up working out in their favor. Just a sloppy second half from the Pacers. I thought they just rushed a lot of shots. They weren't very patient. And one thing in these moments, I'm a massive Tyrese Halliburton fan. I have hated on many of the players that said that he was overrated because this guy's a baller, but I thought way too many times in the second half he was overly passive. Obviously, we know his main attribute is he is the ultimate floor general, gets other guys involved, is not necessarily a number one scoring option, but you saw it late in the game, even on that Turner three, he penetrated the paint. He had Mitchell Robinson on his back. OG Anunoby was kind of sliding over to contest, but I thought Tyrese had a clear shot at the lane here. He did his little signature U-turn is what some people are calling it, takes the ball back out, ends up passing it to Miles Turner, who takes a kind of ill-advised three-point shot there that allowed Josh Hart to go get that rebound. But in these moments, I wish Tyrese Halliburton, like he did against Giannis in that first series, would just take the ball at the rim, live and die by the result. You're the best player on the team. Just go make a play. And I thought there was way too many times. specifically in the fourth quarter of this game where he was just super passive, not as aggressive as I would like him to be. But credit to the Knicks, they threw a bunch of different looks at him. Tibbs may have saved his job in this game. The Knicks obviously saved their season in this game. They've got a massive one. They have to respond. You can't get an emotional win like this and then have a meltdown in the next game. You've got to find a way to respond. And that's kind of what I'm going to be looking at. Does Tibbs stick with the two big starting lineup? And does he stick with his, because the Knicks have been rocking 6 or 7 guys. They went 9 deep in this game. Very curious to see if they stick with this lineup moving forward.
Yeah, I think that they'll try this Robinson back in the starting lineup again, and this is my biggest issue with Karl Anthony Towns throughout his entire career. I mean, really everyone's issue is constantly puts himself in foul trouble. And I mean, I see no reason. I've said this multiple times. I see no reason why he shouldn't be the best player on the floor, especially in this series, given his talents. And I mean, he did show us that in the fourth quarter. But, like you said, mentioned, he and Brunson were both in foul trouble for the majority of this game. But this is the story with Karl Anthony Towns. Almost every game, he's in foul trouble. And it's really not that he's a bad defender, in my opinion. He just takes dumb fouls at times, and that's my biggest issue with Karl Anthony Towns. But I mean, I gave him his flowers, and I'm not giving him any more. But Jalen Brunson, or let me talk about Tyrese Halliburton just for a second. Another, just a small critique on these great players here, but yeah, the only one of the concerns with Tyrese Halliburton is just his at times his lack of aggression. He's a very streaky scorer, in my opinion. He can get pretty hot at times, and then there's also games where he really doesn't score at all. Um, and I don't know the exact stat. You may have it of his clutch shots throughout the entire season, game tying or game winning shots is some staggering 90% or something like that. Um, it seems like the two clutchest players in the NBA, at least this season, are playing against each other here. And he did have an opportunity to be more aggressive in that game three. But I mean, if you would have told the Pacers that they would have won both two games on the road in New York and lost this first game three, I still think they take the position that they're in. And the Knicks still have a lot more pressure on them because you don't want to go down 3-1. and but yeah, you mentioned Tom Thibodeau. I mean, it's hard to build lineups when your team, or it's hard to maneuver things when your team's in foul trouble like that. But credit to him for actually doing the things that he gets criticized for so much or against, with the just playing more people. Shamit came in, gave him some good energy, gave him some passion there on a defensive. He forced an offensive foul on, can't remember who it was, maybe Matherin, who's what's going on with Matherin, by the way. But he came in and started yelling at the crowd and all these type things, and I mean that's good for a Knicks team who, like I said, usually only plays 5 or 6, 7 guys. And I need to know, is McBride, is he a free agent this off season? Because I think a lot of teams would love to try and grab this guy to come be a part of their team and play him a lot more minutes, because he's shown that he can come in and give good scoring flurries for the Knicks team all year long, to be honest. But I don't know. I still feel really good about where the Pacers are at, although, and I do think that they still somehow make it, or they will find a way to make it to the finals, but they're still going to be the overwhelmingly underdogs, even if they do make it to the finals.
Yeah, a few things. Like you mentioned, Tyrese Halliburton, 12 of 14 in the final 2 minutes on either game tying or lead changing shots this year. So, like I was talking about that moment, you've got a guy who is batting an unbelievable percentage that should be putting up shots for his team, who just, I don't want to say played scared, but a little timid in that moment when he had his guy beat. So I'd like to see him be aggressive there. In terms of McBride, he's still got 2 more years left on his contract with the Knicks. It'll run through the 26-27 season at about $4 million annually. It's actually, they've got him declining per year. So it's a very, very, very good extension for the New York Knicks. They've got him on a very manageable, team-friendly contract. And that's one thing that I think we're going to see more of in terms of what Jalen Brunson did this past offseason. He signed a more team-friendly deal with the Knicks, taking, I believe it may have been almost $100 million less than what he would have if he would have waited and signed an extension this offseason. Um, Not that we're going to have more guys willing to do that, because obviously Brunson is very passionate about the Knicks franchise and winning. He's allowed them to put a finals contender around him, but with the CBA restrictions, I think the amount of max contract guys that we see in the NBA today is going to significantly lower over the course of the next few years as this CBA restrictions start really hitting teams, and they're going to realize we cannot pay max money to just any player. It's going to be the top probably 10, 15, 20 players in the league are going to get these max type contracts. And if you don't fit in that window, I think we're going to see guys starting to take maybe not much lower than the max, but it's going to be a significant enough to really impact a team's ability to put a roster together moving forward. So I think that's incredibly interesting um, thing to look at as we kind of get into the offseason here. And I'll talk about it in a little bit, but we got some significant contract extensions coming up. The Spurs have one, and De'Aaron Fox are going to have to make a decision on. Um, are guys like that going to start continuing to get the max, or are teams going to be hesitant to hand it out? That's going to be incredibly interesting. In terms of Benedict Mathurin, this he is such a polarizing player because at one point early in his Indiana career, you thought this guy has a chance to be a legit top option for this team. He's a scorer. He impacts the game. He plays with so much passion. He's almost got like a Dylan Brooks type of energy where he just goes at guys. He is just, and we thought this was, I thought personally this was going to be a series he would thrive in because the blood, the intensity, the rivalry that this series possesses, that it would be perfect for what Benedict Mathurin brings to the game. But he has been irrelevant. 9 points in the first game, 0 points in game two. He scored 2 points on 8 minutes in last night's game. And I would not be surprised if he's completely shut out of the rotation moving forward. It's incredibly interesting to see the fall that he's had. He was very efficient as a six man scoring the ball this year for the Pacers, but in the playoffs, he has been virtually unplayable for majority of this playoff run, which I'm not going to say has hurt the Pacers because obviously they're 2 games away from playing the NBA Finals. But look, we're going to see it. Aaron Nesmith is going to be a game time decision with that knee injury that he suffered in either third or fourth quarter of last night's game, kind of late in the game, which that honestly was a big turning point and helped spark the run. Um, Karl-Anthony Towns came up limping towards the end of the game. Looked like his knee was bothering him, and then Josh Hart on that massive rebound that I talked about also came up kind of hobbled with a knee injury. So there's some key bruises, beat up guys in this series that we're gonna have to keep an eye on. If Neesmith's not out there for the Pacers, that's gonna be a big hit, and we could see Ben Shepherd or even Mathurin start come back into the play here a little bit. That will be a big, big, big change in this series if the Pacers lose Neesmith.
Yeah, and date back to last year, the Knicks lost to the Pacers in seven in round two. A lot to do with. I'm not saying the Pacers wouldn't have won, but they had to deal with their own injuries. With OG had a hamstring last year. I mean, these things are going to happen, especially more prone to the Knicks, who only play so many guys. And we'll see Neesmiths. But the good thing about the Pacers, what they got going on, is they have these guys. Obviously, Matherin's going to have to get out of it. He just had some terrible decisions, terrible fouls yesterday. He just doesn't seem engaged for some whatever reason. But I still trust him enough to hopefully get out of it because I like his game a lot. Um, but we'll see what he does going forward. But luckily, they have so many guys that they play and trust. And Rick Carlisle, I mean, he might throw you and me out there. It seems like he just trusts everyone to go do a part within the team, whatever it is. And really, the main thing he wants his team to do is just get out and run. Transition game is really where the Pacers thrive. I mean, they're not a bad half court offense, but really they make their money moving the ball up and down the court fast, and that's to do with they don't have to play. I think they play their starters less than 35 minutes a game, which is a lot different. Excuse me. Them and the Thunder are the only two teams that really have that luxury right now. And you see these other teams, Knicks, excuse me, and these other teams having to play their starters up to 40 plus minutes.
Yeah, that's very key. The depth that the Pacers have had has been something that a lot of people have talked about throughout the course of this playoffs. You saw, I mean, it's really the injuries have been the story of the playoffs in many facets. The Bucks were injured, the Damian Lillard injury, of course. The th three of the stars, the Cavs got hurt. Not saying that the Pacers wouldn't have won these series without those injuries, but it's happening all across the league. I mean, you saw Curry in the Western Conference suffer injuries. The Nuggets guys suffered multiple injuries. So it's just a storyline that we're seeing, and the depth is being tested on these teams. The Knicks were a team that we thought could not afford to suffer injury at any point. We'll see if the game three prove that they can kind of go deep into their lineup, if those guys can be trusted over the course of a series. But the Pacers have always been a team that many people viewed as a team that could go deep into their rotation. And you're saying you got Jarris Walker, who was a top 10 pick not too long ago, hasn't even played in the series. Johnny Furphy, who was a guy they drafted last year, hasn't played much for them. That I know that they've got high hopes on. Mathern hasn't played a lot. There's thought that they might go to Thomas Bryant at some point in the series, but it's been Tony Bradley out of nowhere that's come in and got minutes for him. TJ McConnell's obviously been big for him, really for the past few years as the veteran point guard off the bench that kind of controls things. And there was a couple bad McConnell possessions towards the end of this game, um, that I didn't necessarily like, just trying to do too much. But the Knicks, the Knicks haven't proved to be able to go deep until this game. That was something that we always saw the Pacers being able to do, and it's very interesting to see kind of that dynamic work itself out throughout the course of this series. And it's going to be tested moving forward, especially if Neesmith's not able to go or the Hart/Towns injuries kind of linger on this way. But a very interesting series. Obviously, game four is going to take place Gamebridge Fieldhouse Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday night, I'm sorry. And it's going to be an exciting end. The Knicks have got to steal another one in Indianapolis if they want to have a shot at this series.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'm still going to stick with my pick of Pacers in in seven.
Yeah, I, the Pacers have to be the favorite at this point. It's hard to see the Knicks have many avenues to win this series. They have to take this game because I just don't see them being able to outlast um, the Pacers in three more games. But before we kind of move forward, I would like to give a shout out to the Indianapolis Colts organization. They have lost Jim Irsay, the beloved owner of this franchise, Carly Irsay, and the Irsay daughters are now taking over. Very, very sad situation took place. Obviously, Irsay or his dad has owned the team since they came over from Baltimore, moving to Indianapolis. He has done a tremendous job of the organization, leading them to a Super Bowl back in 2006 with Peyton Manning at the helm. Tony Dungy has done a lot of good, not only for the Indianapolis Colts as a franchise, but the community of Indianapolis. He's was very giving to the community, very giving to people, had a big heart. Obviously, battled many addiction substances and stuff like that, but um, moved past it, was able to continue forward and just prove how big of a heart he has, how much he cared about the city, the organization, the league. So shout out to Jim Irsay and the organization. We wish them the best moving forward. Obviously, it's a very interesting time for my sports franchises. Greg Popovich stepped down not even a month ago as the Spurs head coach, and now Jim Irsay has passed away, leading to a new direction for both of my professional sports teams. So it'll be interesting moving forward in that realm, but it's exciting future for both organizations, and I'm looking forward to continuing to support them and the upcoming season. Uh, Beyond that, I want to give a happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. We thank everybody who serves to protect this country and who has served in the past that we want to honor on this day. Very important day. Reach out to your loved ones that have served. Without them, the country would not be where it's at and where we're going to be heading moving forward. So we give a thanks to everybody on this Memorial Day.
Yeah, I'm with you on all those points. Happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. Also, want to give a quick moment here for not really sports related, but just a lot of people our age and really around the world probably took a hit as we learned the news that Phil Robertson passed away last night. Um, sort of it was coming, diagnosed with Alzheimer's not too long ago, dealing with a number of health issues. But I mean, that show and Duck Dynasty, but just him as a man overall, I would argue helped shape my childhood in a number of ways. And, it was a very sad moment hearing the news that he passed away. So, same thing as far as the Ursay family to the Robertson family. Our thoughts are with those involved with that. And, yeah, our thoughts and prayers on those very sad, two tragic deaths that have happened in within the last week.
Yeah, so we want to give our thanks to those people, but we want to continue now talking about basketball as we've got another conference finals going on, the Western Conference Finals between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Just like the Eastern Conference Finals has been a very weird series in a much different fashion. The Oklahoma City Thunder are up 2-1 over the Timberwolves, with Minnesota just recently winning game three. These have all been pretty much blowouts. Most recently, the Timberwolves winning by 42 points in game three. But game one was very interesting. You had a very hot start from Julius Randle. The Thunder kind of came out of the gate slow. Didn't really know kind of how that game was going to trend. And then after really the first quarter, the Timberwolves had no offense, no substance of much. Anthony Edwards really struggled in this game. Um, Naz Reid was 1 for 11, 0 of 7 from three. He was pretty poor for this first game. Just not a whole lot really to talk about in terms of what you got from Minnesota. You had a good Shea game for the Thunder. He had 31 points in 38 minutes. Kind of a low scoring, just kind of thug it out fest. I wouldn't say either team really shot the best. Oklahoma City was right around 50%, but it didn't feel like they had played their best. And then they come out in a more competitive game, game two. Anthony Edwards finally kind of stepped up, had a decent game, really struggled from three still. Rudy Gobert, I thought, was pretty bad for the first two games of the series, but Minnesota's kind of able to be competitive. You had Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid both play a little bit better in game two, but Julius Randle was, I mean, he was benched at one point in game two. through that fourth quarter because just how bad he was playing. 2 of 11 from the field. Just a complete opposite flip from game one on his performance. Then you get into the Oklahoma City Thunder this game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was brilliant. 38 points. Jalen Williams, I thought, had a tremendous game. 26. Chet Holmgren, 22. You got a little bit of everything. Kasey and Wallace came in and gave you some really productive minutes. Caruso's been a rock star this series like he has been for most of the playoffs. The Thunder really only went 8 guys deep. They played Joe and Kendrick Williams a little bit towards the end of the game, but they're really trusting their top guys in the series, at least to the first 2 games. And then you get into game three, it was just a complete runaway from the start. Minnesota jumped on them early. They kept the foot on the gas, up 20 after the first quarter, and the lead only extended. The Minnesota won every single quarter of this game, um, winning 143 to 101. Thunder pulled the plug early in the third quarter. You didn't see their guys play really the rest of the game, and just the bench kind of grinded it out the rest of the way. Just a good all-around performance, I thought, from the Timberwolves to put this game out of reach early. Julius Randle, much more efficient, kind of dialed it back. He's had a tremendous playoff run and really back half of the season for the Timberwolves. I would like to think that he's going to be a guy they're going to prioritize extending and want back on this team. Anthony Edwards, I thought, was brilliant. They finally got some decent production from the bench. Terrence Shannon Jr. came in out of nowhere, dropped 15. He was Energizer Bunny, just unbelievable to kind of fuel them early in that first half. Very weird series. I don't think we have as many hard hitting points to really kind of dive into because I don't know that we have a good sense of where the series sits. If you had to ask me right now, I'd say that game three is just an anomaly, and we're going to see the rest of the series play out in game one and two, and we're going to see the Oklahoma City Thunder playing for an NBA championship. But if the Minnesota Timberwolves can kind of channel some of the energy, play with more consistency like they did in game three, this could be a very interesting end to the series. We have yet to see a clutch game, and that was what I kind of pointed at for the series, how Oklahoma City was going to respond in the clutch. Because this, I mean, really in this whole playoff run, they've either been blowing teams out or they're getting blown out, and we haven't seen them a ton in closing time. We saw a little bit of that. They were able to get some wins in Denver, but I don't really know how this series is going to play out. I don't have a lot of answers from the first 3 games of this series.
Yeah, the first 2 games played out pretty similar to what the Oklahoma City Thunder season has went. Anthony Edwards game one, like you mentioned, he was not good. He wasn't aggressive, which I've said this multiple times. Really, the only knock on Anthony Edwards that you can have is how at times he disappears. And other than that, he's tremendous. He came out game two, was much more aggressive, but I believe he was 1 of 9 from three in game two. He had 1 of 9 from three. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 38 and shot 15 free throws, while in game three, which granted the game was over by halftime, but he only attempted 4 free throws and was 4 of 13 from the field. But I just find it remarkable that the Thunder and the Pacers both have such deep teams that players who didn't play a single minute in the last series that they played in are now playing meaningful minutes for them. Like, game one, big Jalen Williams didn't even play, and they were playing Kendrick Williams, who actually came in and did pretty decent for him in that game one. And it seems like I'm with you. It seems if I had to bet on it, that game three was the anomaly game, and the Thunder are going to probably roll over in 5 or 6 here. Definitely, well, that's what the betting odds say. So, yeah, there's nowhere near as much points to comment as there was in the first series we talked about, other than yeah, Terrence Shannon in Game Three, out of big time scorer out of I believe he was Illinois last year. Um, which even by the time he got in the game, they were already up by 15, and he came in and he gave them some really good minutes. But yeah, the Thunder emptied their bench. I think the Thunder win tonight, and they go on to win this series. I picked them in six, so I'll stick with six. And I think we're gonna see. I feel good about my predictions as far as Indiana and Oklahoma City meeting up in the finals, and the Thunder are going to be big time favorites in that series, in my opinion. Or, well, not even in my opinion, that's just what it's going to be. They are sitting at minus 270 to win it all right now. They just seem like they're going to have any kind of lineup to throw out there. But if we do happen to get that series, it would be interesting to see. I mean, we could see 20 different players play in a game, any given game in that series. But credit to Anthony Edwards and what he's done other than game one, because he has been much more aggressive and he was very efficient here in this game three. Julius Randle had a 20 plus point first half of game one and then disappeared in the second half of game one. Got benched in game two, which was very surprising given how good of a playoff run he's had up to this point. It sort of looked like his Nick playoff days. Gets benched in the fourth quarter, and then game three comes out and is much more efficient. Drops him 24. So they're going to need him to continue to be at his all time best, knocking down the three ball, getting to his spots on the low block, using that left hand. If they're going to want to be, if they're going to want to win, and we'll see how they play Shea here. He seems like he was getting the whistle almost every whistle here in game one and game two. Not as much in game three though. So I'm curious to see how these games are going to be officiated. I think that could have a lot to do with it. I mean, Shea was just being classic Shea of. I think Michael Malone called him. What did he call him? A foul artist. He's just magnificent at just driving in and launching his body into other players, and at times he'll just throw up these shots knowing he's already getting fouled, and somehow they just roll in. And he's at least a 90% free throw shooter. So I don't know. It's going to come down to how they're going to be guarding Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and who's going to show up. But they just have too many guys. Like somebody's going to keep showing up for them, whether if it's Jalen Williams tonight, whether if it's Chet Holmgren next game. I mean, there's just too many guys. It's going to take an absolute heroic effort from Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle and probably one or two other guys for them to be able to win three more games against this Thunder team. But I will tip my cap to them for this game three performance because based on how game one and game two went, it seemed like it was already over, and it is definitely not over yet.
Yeah, that's the big storyline so far of this series is the topic on foul baiting, um, whether what Shea Gilgeous-Alexander does is legit or should be rewarded by the league. I mean, there's been many instances in this series and playoffs where he just throws his body around without any contact and is getting calls. Um, there definitely is a discrepancy on stars getting favorable whistles. He is definitely one of those guys that does get a favorable whistle. It's certainly not the reason why the Timberwolves got thrown around, beat around in those first two games. Those were games the Thunder were likely winning without the whistle that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander gets. But there's no doubt that he does get a favorable whistle, and it should be talked about and it should be discussed by the league. Um, not every guy gets that type of whistle, and it's very clear that that's making an impact not only on the series but his season. It allows him to kind of play the way that he does. I mean, there's a clip going around where he's got McDaniels beat, and instead of free laning it. He slows down and just backs into McDaniels, drawing a foul, and then McDaniels pushes him over. It just I don't think there's any need for Shea to play it that way. I mean, he was had a clear lane. He could have made just stop, pulled up floater. Instead, he pauses and McDaniel's showing a lot of frustration, pushes him over, um, gets his foul worth on that one. But I don't know. I don't really like it, but like Michael Malone talked about, like several players and coaches, and I mean, I think it may have even been Nikola Jokic who delivered an interview and said that it's a skill, like it's something that you have to work on. Not many guys have the ability to draw fouls and act the way that they do. James Harden, for the longest time, was a guy that we talked about the exact same things in the prime of James Harden's career, just the ability to get to the free throw line and the favorable whistle that he got because of that. So it's just it's sad that we have such a good series going on in the Eastern Conference, back and forth games. There's a lot to talk about in terms of legit basketball play, and then the big storyline that you're getting out of the Western Conference right now is about the officiating being poor and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander favorable whistle and all this type of stuff. But it was good to see the Timberwolves kind of respond here, put a little bit of life back in this series. I think you're gonna have to it's you're gonna see the Oklahoma City Thunder kind of lock back in. They're gonna have to lock back in. Pivotal game 4 tonight. Very interesting to see how they respond. I would assume they're going to be a lot more focused. There's going to be a lot more intensity. Minnesota has to find a way to manufacture that level of energy again. They're going to be at home. The fans are going to be a little bit more energized and excited than what they were. There was kind of a nervous energy because your back's against the wall. I think they're going to be a lot more hopeful. It's just like it's the same thing we had with the Knicks. The Knicks fans went on the biggest roller coaster ride that I have maybe seen from a fan base in the longest time. They are at the highest high that the Knicks have been in a long time after they beat Boston, a rival of theirs, to get to their first Eastern Conference Finals since the 1999 season. And then you lose those 2 games, and the morale's at an all-time low. You're down by 20 early in that game, then you come back, and then after the game, the Knicks fans are saying, "Oh, Knicks in 6." So it's the same thing with the Timberwolves fans right now. There's a lot of excitement going into the series, and then it was a lot of nervous energy, doom and gloom after the first 2 games. And now you kind of re-energize these fan bases. And so let's see if that can propel those 2 franchises to kind of compete a little bit harder the rest of the series and maybe challenge the Pacers and the Thunder a little bit.
Yeah, you speak about the roller coaster ride. I'm just from looking at Twitter, um, mainly Carl Anthony Towns was being just hated on. Knicks fans on Twitter wanted him gone halftime yesterday, and then they're on their knees praising Carl Anthony Towns by the end of the game, and that just speaks to the NBA playoffs for you. And I mean, I think it's great. We have to get on here and sort of dissect things and calm everything down. But when you're in the moment, you're in the quarter to quarter feelings, you're on these runs. You feel like the game's completely over. You feel like your season's over. You feel like you have no future. And then 5 minutes later, it's you're winning the championship. And that's just how this is just how the NBA rolls, especially in playoff time.
Yeah, for sure. That's the emotional baggage that all of these teams are facing right now is incredibly intense, and there's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of emotion within the organization, but then there's a lot of pressure and emotion from outside the organization. One thing that I find very interesting is so the Knicks back in the Eastern Conference Finals. This is the most watched Eastern Conference Finals up to this point that there's been in several years, whereas the Western Conference Finals ratings are down significantly from the last couple of years. It just shows, I think you would think that the Knicks would have a better whistle because the NBA is going to want them to make it to the finals, obviously for ratings purposes, but that was certainly not the case. It'd be very interesting to see how people react to a potential Pacers versus Thunder finals, for basketball purposes, for this just the talent in the league to disperse among these small market teams, it would be great for the league. But there's definitely a sense of angst that this could potentially be the finals matchup. Obviously, there's a lot of people pulling for the Knicks from a narrative standpoint, from a TV standpoint, from a money standpoint. There's a lot of things riding on the New York Knicks to get there, but they've backed themselves against the wall. So it's going to be very interesting to see if it is two of these smaller market teams in there, how NBA fans react to that, how the media reacts to that, how the league reacts to that. That's going to be um, a really fascinating thing to kind of look at as we get into the NBA Finals here.
Yeah, I mean, I just have a feeling. I mean, I'm gonna watch it obviously, but Pacers Thunder doesn't seem like it's gonna be a very highly rated finals matchup. And what's weird is, yeah, you mentioned the Western Conference Finals are. It seems nobody's watching them, but the Eastern Conference Finals, everyone's watching them. But if you look at the two conferences, you look at the two Western, even just the playoffs, the Western Conference is so much better than the Eastern Conference. But at this point, it doesn't even as much matter when you just look at how many people are watching the games and who cares and whatnot. And a lot of it may have to do with how dominant the Thunder have been throughout the entire season. But I don't know. I just once you dissect it more and you look in, obviously New York's the big market team. The NBA is gonna. You would think Adam Silver's really hoping that the Knicks could make it to the the finals, but if you're one of these two fan bases, those are two of the best places to play. Those places are going to be rocking in the finals, whether if it's Indiana and the Thunder. Um, I don't think it would necessarily be the best. I do understand what you're saying. You know, it'd be good for the NBA as far as more of the Adam Silver run here of everyone's getting a shot, but I don't feel like the ratings would be just great if that's the matchup we're going to get.
No, from a rating standpoint, it's definitely not going to be the best, but in terms of dispersing league talent, which is definitely the focus of the league the last few years, and we've seen it with the CBA. That would be something that would be applauded, I would imagine. And we talk about the CBA and how it's going to restrict a lot of things. Um, all four teams that are left have made significant trades or roster moves that have led their team to get to this point. So we talk about how the CBA is going to restrict a lot. There's still going to be a ton of player movement. There's still going to be teams making win now moves, making trades, making acquisitions that are going to affect their team. The Pacers have traded for Halliburton. They traded for Siakam. The Knicks, obviously, they went out and signed Brunson and Carl Towns. They've made the trades for OG Anunoby and Bridges. The Timberwolves have went out and got Randall. They've traded for Rudy Gobert. They've acquired Mike Conley. Um, Thunder went out and got Isaiah Hartenstein. So that we're still going to see plenty of player movement, and it's going to allow teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Pacers, these smaller market teams to go out and make moves that maybe we hadn't seen in the past. But there's still going to be plenty of player movement. There's still going to be excitement. It just maybe these players aren't going to the typical markets that we typically see, and it's going to allow teams like this to kind of expand out their roster and maybe be more competitive than what they were able to be in the past. Because a guy like I don't like a guy like Pascal Siakam never would have viewed Indiana as a favorable spot in the past, but he recognized and advocated for that trade from Toronto to go to the Pacers to play with Tyrese Halliburton because he saw kind of where the league was trending. Um, so I think it's good for the league. Obviously, from a rating standpoint, they're begging the Knicks to get in there, and it doesn't even matter who were to get in from the Western Conference at that point. I think if you have the Knicks in the NBA Finals, the ratings are going to absolutely skyrocket.
Yeah, I agree. But it just seems as we sit here today that these if you look at the betting odds, it seems like the season's already over based on minus the number of minus 270 for the Thunder, and based on how the seasons went. If we just look at all those kind of things, how dominant the Thunder have been. I just feel it's an utter disappointment if the Thunder don't win the championship this year. This seems like the best window for them. We've said it multiple times, and it's the seas are parting for Oklahoma City to go win a Shea Gilgis to get a championship to combine with his MVP he was awarded with a few days ago. And it's not necessarily the thing I would want to happen, although I do say it is very enjoyable to watch these playoffs when you don't have a dog in the fight because you can just kind of play off all of these fan bases and their roller coaster rides as opposed to when you have a team in there, you're stressing out so much. But yeah, I just want to say I feel like the Thunder will and they have to close out this series and the next series.
There's a ton of pressure on this Oklahoma City Thunder team to get the job done because we've talked about it multiple times. It's going to be an arms race for many, many years to come. In the Western Conference, you're going to have the three teams from Texas are all going to get better. They're all going to be pushing for the playoffs. The Timberwolves team they've playing right now, I don't see them getting significantly worse anytime soon. The Lakers are going to have a full season with Luka Doncic. What are they going to what are they going to be able to put around that roster? The Nuggets are still out there. The Clippers are still out there. We'll see what the Warriors do with a full season with Butler and that team. Um, so the Western Conference is tight as it's always been. We're going to see Cooper Flag enter the fray here. The Spurs have got a lot of assets to move with. The Trailblazers are a sneaky team that I think if they make a couple of moves around the margins, we see Scoot, Denny, Klingon, these guys continue to develop. Tamari, Kamara, as we've talked about, if that team continues to get better, there's going to be a completely healthy Pelicans team, who I'm not saying is going to be a playoff team, but they're going to be healthy. They've got Murphy and Herb Jones and Zion, and what do they do with the 7 pick in the draft? That's team going to get better. I don't see the Jazz getting any better anytime soon, but um, there's going to be a lot of good teams in the Western Conference for many, many years to come. The Thunder are only going to continue to get challenged more and more as some of these teams that are younger start to develop and put pieces together. There's still several teams that could acquire a Kevin Durant type of player that could propel them up to that Thunder level. So we'll see kind of how that develops. And as we talk about that, I kind of wanted to move into a discussion about kind of some of the significant dates, things to watch out for as we move into the off season and get some thoughts on that. The day after the NBA Finals end, which could happen June 14th, 17th, the 20th, or the 23rd, um, teams are going to be allowed to renegotiate with their own free agents ahead of the draft, which will take place for the first time this year on two separate days. First round will take place on June 25th. The second round will take place on June 26th. And so we've talked about in the past, but the NBA has a very important scheduling issue that they have to figure out because if the NBA Finals were to go 7 games, those teams would have to turn around and the NBA draft would be 2 days later, which is just asinine to think about that the schedule is that tight. Obviously, there's a lot of discussions about 82 games, shorten it down to 72 games, but then people are concerned about chasing scoring records and all that type of stuff. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of that. But June 25th, 26th will be the draft. June 29th will be the deadline for player or team options and qualifying offers to free agents. That will then lead us into June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern. NBA teams will be allowed to negotiate with other teams' free agents. July 1st will be the restricted free agency date for those players that are on restricted free agent contracts to sign offer sheets. And then shortly after that, July 10th through the 20th, we're starting to get into the NBA Summer League. And the start of August, as I talked about before, there's going to be players that are extension eligible that are going to be able to sign contract extensions with their organizations. I mentioned De'Aaron Fox. We had the whole saga all summer last year with Lowry Markkanen, whether he would get traded or sign that extension. He signs an extension the day after he would be able to be traded at the trade deadline. So that's an interesting day to watch and how our team's going to handle whether players get max contracts or not. So that's going to be a very exciting time of year for me as a fan of the NBA. I think all of that stuff is as compelling as anything that any sports league can provide as the NBA offseason. It's always electrifying and it's going to start extremely quick after the NBA finals, which is why I like to take time out and talk about it well in advance so we're prepared in case the finals were go up to the point where it'd be 2 days before the draft.
The draft, if the NBA Finals go 7 games, which is obviously what the NBA would love to happen, is just it just seems like a joke for what these teams will have to do, especially when you're the Thunder and you're going to have every pick. You got a plethora of draft picks, and so that just puts so much pressure on the organization, and it really will stress on how important some of these scouting positions and these, just the general manager position as a whole, what they have to do. And you got teams who don't even have general managers right now, a la the Denver Nuggets don't even have a general manager technically, or they haven't hired one. So you got teams like that who are having to deal with all these type things as well. And it's just, there's, as much as it is interesting, the scheduling I think is just pretty, it's just so congested there once the finals do end. It's so back to back because you're going to have the summer league right after. It's going to feel like it's right after the finals. It's going to move so fast, is how it always goes. So there's so many moving things, and in some ways, that's why it's beneficial for teams to not even get into the playoffs, because you're going to get a shot to be in that top of the lottery, and then you're going to have more time to sort of figure out where things are going to go. But yeah, if you're the Thunder or any of these 4 teams left and you're wanting to hope to get to the NBA Finals, you better have Sam Presti, guys like Sam Presti, guys like um, the general manager of the Minnesota Timberwolves,
Tim Connolly.
um, Tim Connolly, who are gonna have to spend most of their time focusing on the draft, but and free agency. But then also, you mentioned guys who are extension eligible. There's the other big names as well. You got Luka Doncic that can be extended this summer, and I'm sure there's many more that can be extended. I know Jaren Jackson can be extended. There's a number of guys who teams would like to assess their performances based on what they're doing in the playoffs. Because I mean, think of guys like Ty Jerome, who we thought were going to get all this money, and then they go into the playoffs and they don't do anything. And do teams factor that in to their contracts? Do they not? And then you also have the draft as well. So I don't know. There's so many moving things. It's going to be hard to keep up with, but that's why we're going to be here to do it.
Before we kind of wrap up here, the last thing I wanted to throw at you here in a hypothetical 7 game series in a 5-on-5 matchup, which team would win? For the first team, you got Team USA, Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Anthony Davis. Versus Team World, you got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Victor Wembanyama, and Nikola Jokic. In a 7 game series, 5v5, who wins between those two teams?
This is I love these kind of conversations. I did see Giannis say that he wants this to happen at the All Star break next year, and man, I hope it does, because obviously it wouldn't be a best of 7. But look, I mean, I'm as biased as it comes when it comes to Nikola Jokic. But if you're going to surround Nikola Jokic with other MVPs and Wemby and Luca, I think the world team wins in 5 games. I just maybe if those some of those other guys were um who, who did you say read out the USA starting five again?
It'll be Curry, LeBron, KD, Jason Tatum, Anthony Davis.
I mean, maybe if you say 5v5, I mean, maybe does you could make an argument Anthony Edwards is somewhere in the five for the USA. I mean, maybe 6 games. I definitely lean world team. I mean, especially, I mean, the only thing they're sort of, I mean, they could play Luca. Obviously, they're going to try and abuse Luca, and Jokic, but that's why you're going to have Wemby and Giannis, and obviously Shea would have to take a very big, more of a defensive, um, uh, sort of mindset or role, which he's capable of doing. But they can play any kind of way. They can play the slow way through Jokic. They can play the ISO through Shea or Luca. They can get the putbacks from Wimby or Giannis. And it's not to take away from what the USA team has. If all those guys were in their prime, I mean, then that's a different conversation. But if we're sitting here today, those players sit here today, I think I would take the world in 5 games. But that would be very entertaining. And I think I would like to think that the two guys who I have criticized for their efforts in the All Star game, and it's been atrocious to watch those two, Luca and Jokic, if they would actually lock in on, or sort of take an effort into that as sort of like a stand as Europe itself for the world as a whole. Which I guess Shea is from Canada, but a lot of those guys being from Europe, maybe they sort of bind together that way. I don't know. So there's a lot of ifs there, but man, that's such a fun hypothetical situation. And I hope we get to see it. And it wouldn't be for a 7 game series, but to answer your question, I would take the world in five.
It's it's so tough. Like if this was everybody in their prime, it would maybe be a different conversation. But if they were all at today's level, the size, the spacing that like not only are Jokic and Wemby like physically imposing compared to what Team USA would throw out there, but both those guys space the floor at a pretty high level. You've got the ultimate creators in Luca and Shea, and then Giannis is just a do-it-all freak. Like I don't see anybody stopping like defensively, I even think, because you've got two of the ultimate rim protectors and Wembanyama and Giannis on the same team here. I just think that the world team would be better suited in a playoff series in today's game. But if this really is on the line and they're playing for your country, we've seen what LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry have leveled up to in the past. And even I thought Anthony Davis had a pretty good Olympics for him um, in the last Olympics last year. But I think I'm with you. I'd probably take the world, but I would lean more 6 or 7 just because of the respect that those guys for the U.S. have earned with their commitment to playing in the Olympics in the past. But like you said, that would be an extremely, extremely exciting thing to see if they were to expand the All-Star game into that. Obviously, we're never going to see this at a legit series or world level, but we could see this in the NBA All-Star game. But who knows, like you mentioned, if the guys would live up to the standard and play competitively like we know that these guys can play too. But fun hypothetical there that I wanted to kind of end off this podcast with. Um, again, we want to give our condolences to the Robertson family, the Ursay family, and wish you guys a happy Memorial Day. Um, this was a very fun podcast that obviously timing wise has been different with just a lot of things going on. But to catch all after 3 games of these series, there was a ton of basketball to talk about, so we maybe didn't give as many off-season topics as what we've done in the past several episodes. Um, as we get closer, obviously, to the draft and free agency, we'll have more of that stuff for y'all in the coming episodes. But we like to go in here and just talk ball, so we had plenty of that to do today. And we look forward to not only the game tonight, but the rest of the series finishing up. Hopefully, have another episode out to y'all next weekend or early next week. But that will do it. on this episode of the State Line Fast Break podcast. If you have any more comments for our viewers, Josh.
Yeah, I just want to say those same things. Condolences to the Robertson and Ursay family, and happy Memorial Day. I'm sure we all either have someone in our family or somebody we know who has helped or participated or fought for this country. And we, as we sit here on this podcast, you and I are both grateful, and we want to, you know, just celebrate everyone out there who has taken that selfless act to do things for you and I and everyone else, so we have the ability to sit down here and do a podcast like this. So all those things going on, those are bigger picture things than just basketball itself. So but those things allow us to come down here into this you know, fake reality world of a sport while they are out there fighting for our country. So I just want to like I said, condolences out to those two families, and thank you to all our active and former military individuals out there.
Well said. Like always, you can check us out anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at the State Line Fast Break Pod. This has been another edition of the State Line Fast Break Podcast, and we thank you all for listening.